ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
There are a few points of difference between us and the AFL that we've got to work through. You know, Andrew Dillon's got a job to do for the AFL, but I've got a job to do for the taxpayer of South Australia. And where else is going to do this better than us?
That's South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas talking about the future of Gather Round. Confident, isn't he? The reality is the South Australian government and the AFL are still in talks about how the Festival of Footy will look as soon as next year. Who else could be in the running to host the event? How might South Australia keep things fresh? And will a lack of sold-out matches in 2026 impact the state's hold on the showpiece fixture? And with a full round of footy to come, we preview some of the action. I'm Poppy Penny and this is ABC Sport Daily. Simeon Thomas-Wilson is a journalist with the Adelaide Advertiser. And Simeon, while Gather Round is mostly about the footy, there are a lot of other conversations swirling around it this year, chief among which is the fact that the AFL and South Australia haven't yet come to an agreement as to the future of the round. Premier Peter Malinauskas has been pretty clear he wants it in SA long term. Andrew Dillon from the AFL has been a little more coy about those discussions. Where are we at? What is the pitch that South Australia is putting forward to the AFL?
Hey, South Australia is pushing hard to keep Gather Round. They want a long-term contract. I guess they're saying, there's been enough goodwill. They've built it up to what it is. They say it's one of the great sporting weekends of the calendar, even in Australian sport.
We are so excited to be on the eve of another Gather Round here. It's gone from, it was a bold idea when it started, but it's now one of the great events on the Australian sporting calendar. It is truly the best of our game on so many levels. It celebrates the elite, it engages the community and puts on a festival of footy that is unmatched anywhere in the country.
So they're hoping for a long-term contract. Also, exclusivity on Gather Round. So there's a little bit of talk about, whether Sydney gets an AFLW Gather Round. So I think South Australia also wants exclusivity on the concept. The other thing they're kind of talking about is ways to keep it fresh. So eventually, if they do get a long-term contract, you probably will see like a stadium or a ground built in Clarence Vale after we've seen one built in the Barossa Valley.
It means we have to keep it fresh, and we've got a few ideas about how we could achieve that. But that's only going to be realised if we've got a bit of certainty around a deal beyond 1 year.
So that's where negotiations, I think they're going to continue over the weekend. I think ideally the AFL and the SA government would like a deal announced and finalised by the end of this Gather Round, but they also seem both comfortable to leave this weekend with the future of it still up in the air.
Looking forward to fruitful discussions with the Premier over the next couple of days.
If you were the Premier of another state, say Tasmania, who are getting a team in a couple of years, New South Wales, who, as you say, looking at an AFLW Gather Round, Western Australia, who have had the All-Star match and the State of Origin match, but might be looking for something a little bit bigger, what kind of pitch would you be putting forward to try and nab Gather Round from South Australia if it is indeed in a vulnerable position?
Well, if from Tasmania, it has to be around the new stadium. So that's 2031. I think that's about going to be done around that. So I'd say the AFL, South Australia can have Gather Round for however many years, but then when the stadium's built, we get it done. And because you've got the north-south divide, you'd have to have maybe two mini little Gather Rounds. You'd have one in the south, one in the north, so you'd use York Park in Launceston as that main one there, and then use a new stadium in Hobart. And then you could use either Bellerive or North Hobart Oval as that kind of third venue. That's how I would do it if I was the Tasmanian government. And WA, I think you obviously sell Perth Stadium as the main thing, but I guess the issue for them is that too many of the other grounds that you would use are a bit far away. So yes, I think other states have almost kind of maybe apart from Tasmania, I think have maybe given up actually trying to get Gather Round, to be honest.
And if we look back at the first year of Gather Round, sort of every game was sold out. You couldn't get a ticket. It was absolutely packed. This year, the AFL are discounting tickets for some games like the Demons and the Bombers game on Saturday at Adelaide Oval. Do you think that their inability to sell the weekend out like they have previously would be having an impact on negotiations?
I don't think so. I think there's been enough goodwill between the SA government and the AFL for this, and I think the reason is why there's I guess a lack of ticket sales for Melbourne Essendon is because it's the third time that this game's been at Gather Round at Adelaide Oval. This particular fixture. So I think the issue for the AFL is that the fixturing just needs to be a little bit better.
Look, South Australians are putting their best foot forward. You've got the incredible Adelaide Oval, which is the centrepiece of Gather Round, and as I said, you see the number of people that are coming across and the people from South Australia who are embracing Gather Round. It's hard not to like what we're seeing.
It's a balance because the Melbourne teams, don't want to play the SA teams. Brisbane haven't actually played at Adelaide Oval, so there's a bunch of issues the AFL needs to work out with that.
Do you think that it stays in South Australia moving forward? Have you got a gut feel on which direction this will go and when we might get a decision?
I think it's going to stay in SA. It's going to be how long the deal is. I think 3 to 5 years, if I'm being conservative, that'll be the deal. And I think something will be announced this weekend.
It will feel good to finish the weekend and know where we're going next year for Gather Round. Simeon, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Corbin, Middlemas calls the footy for ABC and will be in Adelaide for Gather Round this weekend. Corb, there are 4 games that have caught my eye in South Australia across the round for a couple of different reasons. And the first is almost macabre. Adelaide host Carlton in the opener tonight. Carlton got run down by the Roos on Good Friday, and Michael Voss made something of a statement by dropping last year's best and fairest winner, George Hewitt. Surely the Blues can't do it again, can they?
I wouldn't say never, given the fact that we thought they'd going into last week, and yet it was almost like a WWE wrestling promotion, the way that it was drawn up, that Carlton had opened up their biggest lead of the game at three-quarter time, and sure enough, they still weren't safe from that position against the previously hapless Roos, who obviously kicked the last 5 goals of the game, and we know the rest.
And it's deja blues for Carlton.
I don't know where Carlton go from here. I guess that the only way that I would sell it is to say that maybe it frees them up. Maybe you think, well, it can't possibly get worse than that. So that the floor feels like it's already fallen out in the Blues season. And so what have they got to lose tonight? Everybody thinks they're going to go and play this Adelaide team that'll just bounce back in front of their home crowd. It'll be a coming out party for the Crows, a way for them to get back in the season after 3 narrow defeats.
The Dockers are going to do it. An Easter miracle for Fremantle as Alex Pearce saves the Dockers at the death.
And yet I'm sure there'd just be that little man on the shoulder for the Crows saying, what if they lost tonight, if they were the team that went 4-4? And as we so often say in the sports landscape, if you want to make the nightmares and all the pressure and everything go away, give it to somebody else. And we'll be talking about the Crows, I'm sure, come Monday if Carlton somehow able to deflect some of the attention onto Adelaide tonight, last year's minor premiers. They wouldn't want to start 1-4.
I think Carlton fans will be very grateful for your optimism there, Corb. Friday night looms as a big one for both Collingwood and Fremantle at the Adelaide Oval. These two teams have had some really close games in recent history, including a thriller at the MCG last year.
He takes the mark. These desperate Dockers! They did! And they did! They win by a point! And it's a win that might take them to September.
The Pies bring back some big names in Nick Dacos and Scott Pendlebury. The Dockers had a bit of a heartstopper at Adelaide Oval last week. Who gets it done on Friday?
I think Freo are quite rightfully the favourite here. Even if Dacos and Pendlebury come back into this Collingwood team, I think they've been super impressive in the young season so far. This game might have a little bit of added spice to it as well, and it obviously lives in the coach's box, given you mentioned the last time that they met, that thriller they played out at the MCG, where Craig McRae took the unusual step in the postgame to basically comment on the way that Fremantle play and the fact that they should go quicker, and that's a better version of them.
They play a good brand of footy when they're up and going fast, isn't it? Maybe they should play a bit more of that at times. It's a good version of them.
You very rarely hear a senior coach comment on another coach in the way that they go about their business. Naturally, Justin Lomua hasn't said too much. Maybe he's going to let his team speak for themselves come Friday night. So that's a nice little backdrop. The first time that they meet since then. I actually think it's a great game to be able to have on at a neutral site on a Friday night. I think it'll be an exciting game of footy. Freo, we've seen what they look like at their best. They go sort of long down the line more than a lot of other teams in the competition that have that kind of firepower. So they have that sort of conservative element to them. And we know Collingwood are the most conservative team in the competition. They're trying to sort of be trying to do the oil and water, if you like, and just be a completely different style in which the way that the game's going. So Collingwood will try and make it into a low-scoring scrap. I actually think Fremantle's best chance of winning, would you believe it, as Craig McRae says, is to go fast and score big.
The Gold Coast Suns are coming off a loss to the D's on the weekend, and the Swans absolutely belted the Eagles. Did the Swans convince you they're the real deal with that kind of performance, or do you take into account their opposition?
Yeah, I'll probably take a little bit into the opposition and the fact that the Eagles had been up for a couple of weeks leading into that. I thought that those kind of defeats were behind them, so I probably read more into it from a West Coast perspective than a Sydney perspective.
Sydney have been utterly superb. But the nightmares return for the West Coast Eagles. Their biggest loss at Perth Stadium. The Swans by 128 points.
I still want to see what Sydney look like against the best without Errol Goulden. I feel like, he comes in, he's the guy that tips them over the top, that they go from being, a finalist to all of a sudden, in premiership contention when Goulden's there and they're up and going. And we saw them against the Hawks a couple of weeks ago. They were really plucky that night, but ultimately when the game was there to be won, they got blown away in the midfield. So I think this is a fun game at the right time. Gold Coast, it was an immature loss last week to Melbourne, so they're in a bounce-back spot. I think this is probably the pick of them. Poppy, out of the four games that you've highlighted, this is the one that I've got on top.
Yeah, and the other one that kind of overlaps with the end of this one is the Western Bulldogs and the Hawks. The Dogs are kind of banged up, and the Hawks are probably still on a high from their Easter Monday epic against the Cats. Do you think that the loss of Tim English and Tom Liberatore, among others, will be too much of a challenge to overcome, as well as beating a Hawthorn side who are pretty full of confidence?
Well, they're the only undefeated team in the competition, the Bulldogs, and yet they're an underdog starting in this game. It feels like sort of everybody feels that narrative that with the guys that are out, it's going to be too difficult for them to try and replace them. English has been excellent to start the season. The new ruck rules have really suited him. So there's a little bit of unknown when it comes to the Bulldogs. I also just want to hold out a little bit, Poppy. I want to see what selection looks like tonight from a Hawthorn point of view, remembering the fact that they won that game on Monday, so they've got a short week. There's only 5 days.
Holmes, top of the goal square. Jack Henry gathers. Moore lays the tackle. Butler gets there. Gets the behind. The go-ahead behind.
And the two guys that ultimately played a huge role in winning them that game, they're two veterans in James Sicily and their super veteran in Jack Gunston. We talk about him like he's 85 years old. They were both banged up on the run. So Sicily hurt his shoulder, and we know Gunston had that hamstring scare in the third quarter. They both came back and ultimately, as I said, played a key role in what proved to be the winning play at the end. But I think all of a sudden, if you took Sicily and Gunston out, say they don't start, I think that sort of almost brings them back to level pegging with both of the teams missing sort of key pieces. So I've got a close watch on selection tonight.
We're in for a great weekend of footy. Corb, enjoy South Australia. Thanks so much for your time.
Anytime. Thanks, Poppy.
Headlines. While we're on AFL, St Kilda's Lance Collard is fronting the tribunal for an alleged homophobic slur in a VFL match against Frankston last month. At the time of publish, that hearing is still ongoing, and you can keep up to date with the finding when it lands on the ABC News app or the ABC Sport website. After some lay days, Bells Beach is well and truly up and running. On the men's side of the draw, there are no local hopes left after George Pittard was knocked out by Miguel Pupo. As for the women, last year's Bells Beach winner Isabella Nichols and reigning world champion Molly Picklum are still in the hunt. The Masters Par 3 competition is always a source of good vibes and adorable kids, and 2026 was no exception. We had Kevin Hart caddying for Bryson DeChambeau.
I was built for this. Get it in the hole, Kevin.
We saw 4 hole-in-ones, including Keegan Bradley, who nailed one last year and backed it up again this year on the 8th.
Oh! Keegan Bradley's second year in a row. This is unbelievable.
Also, for a second year in a row, it was Tommy Fleetwood's son who truly stole the show. Lining up for a shot he's been practicing since last year's Par 3, Frankie Fleetwood almost landed it over the water and onto the green.
The Masters is a great tournament. The Par 3 is my favourite, and probably this is my favourite hole. Nearly got it. I'd like to thank everyone right now. Don't know the names, but yeah.
I get the feeling next year is his year. And Daniil Medvedev has been bageled by Matteo Berrettini in Monte Carlo, losing 6-love, 6-love. I think it's safe to say he took the loss in his stride.
Well, this is becoming a real headache now for Medvedev. And goodness me, the racket is thrown with real venom. And again. And again.
Kidding, that's the sound of a racket going to tennis heaven. I'm Poppy Penny and this is ABC Sport Daily, produced by Declan Byrne. Thanks to Fox Sports, ESPN and Tennis Legend TV for the extra audio used in this episode.